Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fifth in the CEO Success Story series. And today we have actually quite a unique individual who is our guest speaker. James Smith calls himself the President and Chief Connector of Universal Connectivity. Our goal for this entire Cloud Voice Alliance series is to educate and entertain, but primarily educate CEOs, aspiring CEOs, and people who may be stuck in different ways. And we learn all about our guest, how, a lot about their company, how they got to become a CEO, what was their life like on the way to the top position. And James has a really great story that's a little bit unique. He is an entrepreneur. He has been in the telecom industry for the majority of his professional career in various positions, which he'll share with us. He's a strong believer in the EOS, and he will share some stories and maybe some recommendations for people who are interested in having the Gino Wickman kind of story in their company. If they've read Traction, the book Traction, he is a technical expert who today runs business development, sales, and marketing, and has become an operational wizard. One of the things I've learned is that I really like how he approaches his company culture. And for those who may have read my book, which is of course one of the reasons Jeff Dorkin invited me to be an advisor here and run this series, The Rookie CEO, You Can't Make This Stuff Up. I believe that the background path to CEO, the philosophy of the leader, and the leadership styles create the company culture. And James is going to tell us how all that came together for him in his unique journey. So, James, over to you. Introduce yourself, I guess, beyond what I said, and then we'll
Yeah,
jump up
I don't know
to
if I would have. I don't know if I would have used technical wizard. My team might argue with you a little bit on that one. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. James Smith. I'm president and chief connector is a moniker I picked up a while ago. I had the opportunity to meet Tony Hsieh from Zappos and go out and visit out in Las Vegas, and um, they used unique titles, and so I actually picked up Chief Connector as my moniker, just as a result of that experience, and we could perhaps dive into that a little bit more. But yeah, we're a hosted cloud voice over IP phone company going on 28 years in February. We also are an internet service provider, and then we do all the sort of professional services and ancillary planning and execution around delivering telecommunication solutions to our growing mid-market companies. So, and we operate about eight or nine states at the moment. So, and we're based here in West Hartford, Connecticut.
which is a hop, skip, and a jump from where I am in Bristol. So really, let's get going with the first question here, James. When did you know that you wanted to become a CEO, and how did you prepare when you first thought about that in your brain?
I don't know that I actually knew what a CEO was. I can tell you that from a very young age, probably about the time I was a teenager, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I really didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. I just knew I sort of wanted to own my own business and experience in some way. Um, and so I think for me it was um, growing up in a household with a family business. My mother ran a temporary and permanent placement agency called Exclusively Women, which was an interesting exposure to see her running a business and also running a household with 9 children and probably about 9 extra kids hanging around most days. But yeah, I would say that that was really the earliest when I was a teenager. Seeing my parents run their own business.
And based on that, I'm going to guess that the biggest influence on you was your mother, perhaps?
Well, obviously, my mother, my family. I would say that Jim Collins, I think, refers to it as luck. I think I've had a fair amount of luck in my life. So there's probably too many to name, but I can probably give you three or four that have had the most impact. Obviously, my mother being number one. My family who all either worked in the business or worked and run their own businesses as well. Probably my father-in-law would be the next one who had founded this company that we ran together for a number of years before he retired in 2006. And then later on, I would say my EO forum, my business coach, Rich Manders, who I met through EO and through my EO forum. And then probably my closest confidant and friend, Lou Perugini, who I've known since high school, really. We worked together on the ambulance back then and through college. And we've had similar career trajectories. And so he's been uh, pretty much a constant in my life over the years. But just going back to my mother and the household, and watching her run a business and run a household and having some of the freedom that comes with that was good. But as you can imagine, we have a big family, so seeing her operate on holidays, family gatherings, we'd have 20 or 30 people over for any kind of dinner most times. Uh, I think one of the things that stuck out to me as when I was a teenager was her organizing a women's conference. It was actually called a women's conference. I want to say it was like 1982 or 83, sort of when the whole equal rights movement was happening, and so she organized an event 2 years in a row, and I got to meet a lot of very cool women, uh, successful women. Some were actresses, like Rita Moreno and Jessica Savage, who some of you may or may not remember. She was like one of the first um, um, prime time news anchors on the evening news. She was a really interesting person to meet, and so so that I would say is probably it's had that sort of time had a big impact on my thinking about what I wanted to do. Um, my father-in-law would probably be the second biggest one. He was a serial entrepreneur. He ran a family business in construction and development, and so he did a lot of work, commercial construction as well as residential construction. He also got involved with some roll-ups of Sonatrol alarm companies back in the day, and got involved in the thoroughbred racing industry. Where he introduced the limited partnerships to the thoroughbred industry, and had a pretty large yearling and breeding racing group. And so which was really the culmination of why I'm here today. I mean, he went through a tough time back in the late '80s when um, the stock market crashed, and a lot of businesses went under, and he emerged from all that and founded this company. And then we also operated two other companies together, one of which we co-founded, which was involved in mathematics education, which that one's no longer around. But so I would say those are probably the two biggest influences of my the last 30 or 40 years, I would say, um, on my life.
Very interesting. So it looks like you and your father-in-law started the company, which is still in existence today. And
Actually, he started it. He started it in 1995. I was still
okay,
at Verizon Wireless back then, and I joined up and bought half of it in 2000. So he had
okay.
it up and running for a number of years before I got involved with it.
Was he selling PBXs back then? Is that what, do you
Not really.
remember?
No, it was all services.
Okay.
Back then it was just after the breakup of AT&T and T and the Telecommunications Act of 1995, and that meant that AT&T had to sell wholesale their long distance services and other services to other companies. And so he started really initially selling long distance services, both what's labeled as switched and dedicated. Switch being, if you had a phone at home, and you dial a long distance number, that would be switched by the local phone company. Dedicated would be a circuit that we provision to a PBX or a phone system that would bypass the local phone company. So
Okay.
so that was really the meat of what he had started doing, was reselling long distance services. Um, Initially, it was what he got involved with, and then so we had two different he had two different companies. One was an agency business, and one they started with this other one, Universal Connectivity, was truly meant to be a carrier. So he had gone through the process of getting it certified by the FCC and the local PURA, and that culminated in him really doing some unique projects. One of the original projects was introducing sort of a way for schools, private schools, to fund their development of their phone systems and their cabling infrastructure, to build a phone system that could support students, whether in the dorm or day students, to be able to make long distance calls. And so that was really just activating pins on the PBX, and letting them make calls, and make it a profit center for the schools to fund it. And so he kind of crafted that, and that really took off. Sort of in the mid to late '90s at campuses all around the country. Um, and then when I joined, it was still very much a long distance company. We started introducing other services like data services, so a lot of private line and frame relay and ATM circuits, and then some internet circuits. It was not the kind of bandwidth that you had today, but we were doing a lot of things with voice over voice over private line, voice over frame relay. Back before voice over IP became sort of the in vogue, and the service that it is today. Um, so I think that experience sort of helped us kind of craft the growth of the services. But that's really the early makeup of the company.
So it's interesting, with a great segue into the next question, because over the years you've had to change and grow with the market and the technology that's constantly changing and improving. The voice over everything.
Mhm.
I of course lived through the frame relay and ATM business at General Datacom. Voice over ATM was big for us, but um, what were the top 2 or 3 challenges that you overcame running this company on your way to really creating the company that you have today?
Well, I would say early on was really getting getting a handle on what our service offerings were going to be, and who we were going to serve, and what that go to market really looked like, and having a pretty clear business plan. I would say, yeah, we sort of took whatever came in over the transom. So we did
Yeah.
a lot of different projects. And some of my relationships from the wireless world um, would reach out to me to help them with projects. So we ended up doing, in retrospect, it was distracting, but at the time, it didn't seem like it was distracting, because we didn't really know what we were focused on. So we were doing we were doing the services part, and then we were doing these projects for Bechtel and AT&T Wireless and some other carriers, where we were hooking up their circuits, at cell sites, or doing some work in their data centers. Doing cross connects, or extending DS3 circuits or T1 circuits, hooking up alarm systems at the cell site. So that all looked really cool and interesting, and it was a lot of work. We did a lot of overlay work for AT&T and Bechtel back when it was sort of the 3G, 4G overlay, um, and that was great project work until it wasn't, and it was sort of a distraction from what we wanted to do, which is really we wanted to be a services company. We wanted to be, a carrier and focus on that. So so that was sort of a, a big pivotal moment. And then I think um, uh, I think the other part of it was really around um, kind of getting to a point where we had a solid marketing plan, and sort of getting a definition around our marketing plan. And at the same sort of at the same time that we were going through this stuff with the project work, we were also operating two other companies. So the focus around the one business was probably the biggest second obstacle, right? We were
Mhm.
running an agency business where we were sort of competing with ourselves with our core business, and then we run the Math Channel business, which was an education company, which had absolutely nothing to do with telecom, other than the fact that we were able to do sort of this streaming video and build sort of that content distribution network, leveraging some of the skill sets that we had. But I would say it was more around having the distraction of other things. Just because we could do all these other things didn't necessarily mean that we should be doing them all. And so that was probably the biggest, second biggest obstacle was, really just getting focused on one main business instead of having three different businesses.
And then, of course, today you have universal connectivity with your product lines and your service offerings, and you've said the distractions are what kind of one of those big challenges. Do you actually have an ideal customer profile today that everything is focused on your messaging, your service offerings? Do you have something like that?
Yeah, I mean, what I tell people is we really start with our why and our core purpose, which is, that we feel that every business deserves to be better connected. And our mission right now is that we, serve our clients with, you know, the mission statement is our growing mid market companies. So we want to deliver the might be I can't believe I'm messing up my own mission statement, but it's basically um, uh, around centered around enhancing our clients' growth and competitiveness with forward-thinking, scalable communication systems. I have to apologize because I'm just getting over COVID. My brain is a little foggy, so I apologize for that. I normally my team will probably give me a rash for that faux
It's
pas, but
okay. You got it
we we
eventually.
we recite it every twice a week in our level 10 meeting. So I for me to fail on that is horrible. But so it's really around growing mid-market companies. Our niche is really to help mid-sized companies grow and bring to bear the best telecommunications products and tools and services to help them enhance their growth and competitiveness. And so that's really, we're not really focused on super small businesses or the S of the SMB. We're really on the M and E of businesses. So the
Mhm.
midsize and enterprise. Do we have them? Yeah, we have plenty of small businesses, and we've helped a lot of small businesses grow and scale up over the years. So you just never know where some of the companies are going to go to. Or one of our customers in 2010 was about 50 employees, and about 20 of them were remote. Today, they're about 2,200 employees with eight or nine offices around the country. So
Mhm.
so those those are not you don't find those too often, but it's fun to be able to help them scale and grow. I mean, we were sort of in lockstep with them to scale up and grow, and those are good examples.
And
You know,
you learn a lot yourself on the way to those implementations.
oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's
It's support. Support is
yeah,
a
and
whole different animal as well.
it's sort of they were learning how to scale up and scale down. We were learning how to scale up and scale down with them. So we instituted some things with them to make that easier for both of us. So at the end of their sort of busy season, we would have check in and a review, how, what worked, what didn't work, start, stop, keep, sort of what we do internally. We were just sort of doing that as a normal course, and we still do it to this day. Sort of, check in with them. At times, certainly through COVID, we had a weekly standing huddle with them, and some other customers too. So, um, so that, it's sort of, uh, the idea around it was really, if you're scaling up and you have, that many locations, it can get daunting, right? In terms of the number of
Mhm.
carriers and lines and who, vendors. And so, we sort of built it around a sort of the franchise model, so that you could go to any one of the locations and it would look exactly the same. So if they had, an IT person in their Arizona office was going to Florida, infrastructure, everything was exactly the same. And so, I think that helped them take a lot off their plate, and their thinking, so that they could focus on their core business objectives and their internal IT services, instead of having to worry about their communications infrastructure.
It's excellent, actually. So, James, how would you define your leadership style, and how does it differentiate you from your peers to drive your success? These are the peers within your, let's say, your competitive environment.
Yeah, I don't know. I had to Google leadership style. Frankly, I, I, I shouldn't say that. I think when I first started off, I had no idea what leadership style really, right? I started, in my early career when I was at Verizon, there was certainly some coaching and some training, some formal training, that helped shape some of my leadership style. I don't. I think that one of the quotes I really like is, "The laissez-faire seems to resonate with me." I'm not laissez-faire in that I don't care. I'm laissez-faire in that I like to be able to give people the freedom to do what they need to do, as long as we're working all in lockstep together in the right direction, right? And so I try to be somewhat hands off. I think through my EO experience, and some of the other learning experiences, I became more aware of servant leadership, and that seems to resonate with me, and certainly with my personality profile. I want to help. If you look at my Myers Briggs or my DISC profile or my Colby score, I'm a fast start, and I want to help, right? Um, and so, you know, I would say that from um, the way I roll and my modus operandi, the combination of those two fit in. And I would say that, at times, depending on the role that you have to play, or the critical conversations you might have to have, or depending on what meeting you're in, you have to be able to sort of switch hats a little bit. So you have to be able to go and at times be autocratic. As I would say, I'm 5 to 10% of my time autocratic, where somebody just, we need to make a decision. If not, somebody's not going to make a decision, I will make the decision. And sometimes I'm just, there's certain things that I want to make a decision on, and then help people just sort of go and execute from there. I would say my default is the first two. I'm sort of more hands off, and rather be a coach and support, than sort of autocratic.
So as I mentioned from my book and my philosophy, I created the framework where philosophies plus your leadership style drive the company culture. So can you tell us about, you just told us about your leadership style and you've touched on some of your philosophies. Um, Tell us a little bit about the culture at Universal Connectivity, and how your styles actually impact the culture on an ongoing basis. Because you've talked about your weekly huddles and various other things. Help people understand a little bit about how you operate the company and the culture itself.
um, well, when I first started, I had no idea what culture really was and what it meant. My experience with culture was, when I was at it was Metro Mobile when I started on the wireless side, and Bell Atlantic had bought us, and so we became Bell Atlantic Mobile. And so, Ray Smith at the time was the CEO, and they had a whole culture training, which, if you've ever been in a big company, it's just
Oh
another
yeah.
training nobody wants to do. And I certainly didn't want to do it. Um, and but now, having the ability to look back on it was really a special, pivotal time for me, and education, just thinking about running a business. And a couple of things that came from that was um, it was like a 2 day culture training. They did things like your disc profile, and their core values and all that stuff. And so one of the things was be here now, for Bell Atlantic, and that was, be present, and um, do it right the first time, and then think outside the box. It's funny that I can actually still remember some of those core values, but um, they stuck out because I don't know if you're familiar with the disc profile. One of the
Mhm.
activities they did was uh, they made the 4x4 grid, where it's the four quadrants. If you're
Mhm.
dominant, influencing, or whatever, so controlling, etc. And they had everybody put it on their back. And so then you walked around the room, and everybody in the room, there's probably about 50 people in the room. A vast majority of them were, the techs and supervisors that worked with me, and I sort of led the technical field techs at that time. And after about 10 or 15 people, there was a lot of snickering and laughing, and every time somebody, and then there's all of a sudden there's a big crowd congregating behind me, and I'm like, I don't know what these guys are up to, but it can't be good. And so come to the end of it, and you pull it off and look at it. And so what happened was, a couple people put, influencer and social, and then a couple people started putting check boxes in the dominant or controller box, and they started moving closer and closer to the edge of the box. And then there was about 20 of them outside the box. And so, so then there was a little bit of dialogue around it. But for me, it was eye opening, because it told me a little bit about how I was perceived. I could be controlling and all that. And so it was tough medicine, but I took it. And but it was fun at the same time, because they played a joke a little bit around the core values, which was think outside the box. So they were kind of saying I'm a controller outside the box. And so I really had to dial back some of my nature, and change my leadership style. So that kind of led me into how we started learning about culture training and stuff in EO, and it kind of resurfaced, and probably took about a year and a half of just hearing speakers talk about culture, 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 and core values and mission, vision. That I'm like, oh, maybe there's something to this. Maybe we should make our own. And we started a process. I read. I think the first book I read was Vern Harnish's, who is also, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Vern for the Rockefeller habits, and building EO, frankly. Um, and working through the checklist there, which was really starting with your core values and your vision and mission, and trying to get that right. And so it's something that we spent a lot of time with about 10 years ago, and have curated it. We curate it, we look at it every quarter. We talk about it a little more deeply every year. But we really arrived at four core values, which is happiness. We're happy, we love what we do, and it shows. And these are live in the business. Thorough from start to finish, no loose ends. Pragmatic creativity, our clients' needs dictate the solution. And human touch, where real people respond to the immediacy of your needs. So when we think about culture, we start with that culture, and we every candidate that applies gets an email from us that says, here's our vision, here's our mission, here's our four core values. Um, Pick one of the four that resonates the most with you, and tell us a story about how you brought that out in a previous professional experience. And they'll either not reply, which is the fastest way to eject from our applicant process, or they'll write a story that's really interesting, which will then get them to the next stage of, okay, well, here's our predictive index. We want to make sure that your personality and behavior matches a match for the position that we've created, and then we'll have a conversation. And so we start talking about culture before they're even brought in for an interview, and then it's alive every day in the company. I want to say that the litmus test for us and what Vern or any of the other folks that do stuff around culture or core values is, would you hire and fire over it? And so we get really clear, and we're very conscious about it. We look at it not only from employees, but we look at it from vendors and customers. So we've actually fired a customer in early 2020 around our core values, and we fired at least 2 vendors for violating our core values. And fortunately, we haven't had, knock on wood, we haven't had to lay off anybody or fire anybody because of our core values. I think it's we spent a lot of time refining that process and getting that right. So most people that leave are leaving because they're either going on to some other opportunity or they've moved out of state or what have you. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, culture is very much. I think you could ask my team, any one of them, about that. I mean, they're really in tune with it in the way they show up for our support and our support tickets and um, uh, all that stuff. So.
Very interesting. Do you agree that the CEO philosophy plus leadership style drive the corporate culture?
Yeah, I think in any small business, a lot of the core values are aligned with my core values.
Mhm.
I didn't start the business. My father-in-law started the business, so some of those core values that are alive in the business were there before I got involved in the business. So, so I think that
Okay.
that is true. I think if my core values weren't in congruence with it, or my leadership style weren't in congruence with the company's vision and mission and core values, that you know, we probably wouldn't be as successful in keeping and retaining customers or employees. So,
That's great. So let's kind of do a step to the future here. Do you predict any unique challenges running universal connectivity over the next 2 years as we move to the 2024 election for president? Because the country's been somewhat divided since the last election, and there's all kinds of politics that are happening around us between media, social media, friends and family, and reality. So, do you foresee anything being a major issue for you to have to lead around, maybe security oriented issues with UCAS networks or anything like that that you're involved with?
um, so I guess I'd separate the question a little bit. We don't really
Mhm.
look at the national politics in the vast majority of what we do or get involved in any of that dialogue. So, uh, it happens every 2 years there's some form of election. The presidential election has my mind. It's really there's a lot of noise that it creates, and certainly there's a lot of conversations about it that we hear, but we don't really. I don't see any impact on our business per se. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, people still need they still need to talk on the phone. They still need to get on the internet. They still need connectivity. They still need to service their customers. So from that perspective, we're sort of apolitical, and I don't see that there's any sort of issues there. The second part of your question, which was any challenges over the next 2 years? Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, the last 2 years has been a roller coaster like everybody else in terms of finding the right product mix and also being able to get and source materials in the supply chain. And so that has gotten significantly better literally over the last few weeks. But it was tough getting, it's hard to run a phone company and not be able to get phones, as an example. The fortunate part is that we haven't had a need for phones because people are using the soft phones for soft clients, and we're still able to help them communicate effectively on our platform. The next 2 years, I mean, I think it's really going to be around what happens to businesses and how deep and wide this potential recession might go. I think some of the stuff that has happened as a result of COVID, particularly around like the commercial real estate side of things, we're starting to see that ripple come and catch up. Whether it's giving up office space or not returning office space. So some of those leases are probably running out or coming due, and so So I think that on the connectivity side, um, will have some impact over the next 2 years. But there's a new form of connectivity that's going to have to replace that. That'll be more secure VPN. That's more bandwidth at some places, or um, connectivity to their cloud environment and security on their cloud environment. Um, the call center piece is obviously a big part of what most of the people that are moving home are doing. And so some of the analytics and tools and integrations to platforms, so they can operate remotely as a team. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out, I think, in the end. But I think the commercial real estate piece is probably the biggest thing, and then just the state of
Okay.
the economy, and to the extent we can kind of normalize the supply chain.
Okay. Excellent. So you've talked a little bit about, maybe even a little bit about EO and EOS, which you've adopted as a company business model. Can you share why you adopted that and how it helps manage your business briefly, so that people can get a feel for how, if they don't use it, what is it and how could it help their business?
Yeah, I think to back up a bit, it was Vern Harnish's book, The Scaling Up Rockefeller Habits, originally, and then it's now The Scaling Up 2.0, Rockefeller Habits 2.0, I believe is what it's called. Um, and so when I joined EO in 2008 or nine, I think it was 2009. Um, One of my former mates, who's now my business coach, Rich Manders, was using um, that model to run and operate his business. And so I got exposed to it through him and some others on the framework of it. And when I would say probably a couple of years later, somebody gave me Traction, and I read that like cover to cover in a night. And I've actually given that book probably away more than any other book, because I think it's depending on the size of the business, it's a little easier to sort of self implement some of the tools in Traction than it is scaling up. But reading one or the other or both, I think you get a lot of value of building some of the foundational things and some of the systems. But the so we were operating off of the scaling up model for a number of years. We started that process probably in 2013. So we spent a lot of time on our vision, mission, core values, setting our 1 year, 3 year targets, and some of our big, hairy, audacious goals. Um, and um, and then we decided to try. There's a strategic alliance partner for EO called Outpace, that is a implementer for Traction. And it had been a while since we had done an annual kickoff, and I didn't want to self moderate it. I think it's important to have somebody come and moderate an annual and quarterly sessions. And so we did it on Zoom, and it actually went very well, and the team sort of adopted it. And for me, a little bit of the shift was around the process was where it used to be my one-page strategic plan. It was now their one-page, VTL. And so it was, they sort of owned it. And then, we went through the rest of the processes, and we've been doing that really since January 2021. And it's been very effective. And it's helped us. Just one of the early on, one of the things that we started implementing really back when it was first started with scaling up was the daily huddle. Just a 15-minute check-in. What's the one thing I'm going to get done today? Or today I will do this. I think that for us has been helpful, for better part of a decade on execution. And then and we were doing sort of weekly meetings, but the framework, we refined the framework really from the Traction stuff around the L10, which is the leadership meeting. And I think we found that has helped us immensely from um, processing our issues and getting execution week to week, quarter to quarter, and figuring, keeping us aligned with our 1 year and our 3 year and our big, hairy, audacious goal. So yeah, I think you need an operating system, whether it's Traction or scaling up. I think really depends on the size of your business, and then I'm a big believer, a firm believer now, certainly having had a coach and having had people help us with various elements of the quarterly sessions, annual sessions, that you need another set of eyes. And Rich Manders has always been sort of my go-to person, largely because of my relationship from Forum, but also from him coaching us. And to have just that outside person challenging me as the CEO, challenging the team, asking other set of questions around, what they might be hearing or what they might be observing. One of our core values came from one of those sessions where he observed our behavior. We were starting late because the team was working on a customer issue before we could start, and so so that we're real, the human touch part of it, and we're real people who respond immediately to your needs. Literally came from that one quarterly session where he observed our behavior. Um, so yeah, I think it's important to have a coach. I think it's important to have an operating system, and those for me have been instrumental. I think it's also important to have confidants and people and mentors that can help you. My friend that I mentioned, that Lou Perugini, who's been a lifelong friend of mine since high school. We worked on the ambulance together. We had similar career tracks. He's now at AWS and has had various careers with IBM and ETOS and others. And he's probably my closest and dearest friend for a long time, and largely because we've had that similar career path and trajectory. But you need somebody to bounce stuff off of. And I'm fortunate to have a big family and a big, really, a big network. And so, can't be afraid to ask for help and figuring out where to ask for help.
Mhm. Excellent. So I noticed that you're using LinkedIn more recently. So how do you utilize LinkedIn and social media to benefit the business?
I don't know that we're using it as well as we could be and should be. I think it's definitely one of my items. I did watch Bill, yours and Bill's session, and I hadn't known Bill before. I watched your session with him, so I'm inspired by some of his curation and how he's leveraged it. We use it really sort of to connect with our target ideal profile customers, engage them in conversation. Um, as you can imagine, most people don't stay in the same job for very long, so we definitely use that as the platform to keep connected with the folks at every level of the companies that we're at, so or that we're involved with. So if you're an IT person that we work with at this company, and now you're IT director at this company, we're following you and keeping that conversation going. And sometimes that's worked out pretty well for us. And we're fortunate to have customers that are a result of keeping in touch with them and keeping connected to them through LinkedIn. That to us has been the best platform from that perspective. We don't use Facebook as much. I mean, we're posting on all these things from a social perspective, but how we use it and our sales team uses it, it's really kind of engaging our ideal customers and keeping in touch with our existing customers.
All right. So Bill, you mentioned Bill. So one of the interesting things with Bill is he's hired LinkedIn coaches to help him.
Mhm.
And anyone who knows Bill can contact him and he'll give you several recommendations. But everything from LinkedIn profile to how to comment and how to educate, he's used under his, for Stratus Dial, he puts the he simplifies these UCAS solutions for people to
Yeah.
explain to them what everything from what DID means to what UCAS means or anything like that. So he he just posts these things on an ongoing basis, and people seem to engage with that way, and he's generated a lot of business that way. But he is very good at it. He's one of the best, certainly in our market segment.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's
is
it's definitely on our list of our 2023 planning,
Yeah.
how we might leverage it in a similar vein, or perhaps we're hosting some form of video content or podcast type of thing. So,
Okay.
stay tuned. We'll see.
Sounds good. So, what advice would you give to other CEOs who may be struggling with personnel, acquiring new customers, or any other day-to-day challenges that we're hitting as we're in our heavily into inflation and borderline? I won't use the R word. So,
Um, well, I think for me, um, my EO experience, my EO forum has been a godsend. There's certain things that like I said, you can go to various people for whether it's your accountant or it's your lawyer or it's your friends and family, what have you. Um, but to be in a whether it's an EO or a Vistage or YPO, to be in a forum environment where it's similar ethos and similar business owners. Obviously not competing business owners, but um, and to have that as a sounding board and experience sharing, I think that opportunity. I grew up in a house with 9 kids, so I'm number 8 of those at 9. I learned a lot, and I learned and iterated a lot of the mistakes that my siblings created. I certainly made plenty of my own, and so for the way I learn best by uh, learning from others' mistakes, right? So
Mhm.
and so for me, I would say that the value of that forum experience is incalculable because it's not so much it's not a networking thing. It's not a trying to cultivate business. It's much more about how to grow as an individual, how to grow as a an entrepreneur, or a business leader, husband, father, all that stuff. So and hearing some of the experiences that and sharing that come from 7 or 8 other members in the room has helped me avert mistakes, right? And so that's incalculable, right? Like you'll listen to somebody say, "Oh, I'm dealing with this," and I just am like, okay, note to self: never ever do this, right? And so, so you bake certain things into your DNA or into your business plan or into your operandi for how you're going to operate to avert some of those mistakes. And of course, you turn a corner and there's something else you're bumping into. But I would say that that's probably been the best source for helping uh, process and think through any challenges that I've had in my business or in life really, but mostly business. So
Well, that's good. By the way, my next book is about the top mistakes that CEOs make, how to avoid them if you haven't made it yet, and how to recover if you had. So, if you want to contribute to that, we'll have another discussion about that.
share don't scare, right?
so, so what advice would the James of 2022 give to the James of 2000?
um, I would say there's probably not much I would change. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed the past 20 years, and I don't know that if I changed something, how it would change the outcome of or the experiences that I've had. I've had a pretty fun ride. Um, I would say that I think learning about traction or joining EO or YPO earlier um, probably would have changed some of the trajectory and so, would have gotten started on some of these practices sooner. Maybe you become less distracted or less and or more focused on the main thing, and learning some of these practices would have been probably extremely helpful certainly during the early 2000s when we were running in a lot of different directions and trying to be everything to everybody. And so I would say that that's probably one thing would be join EO or YPO earlier. Second would be dream bigger, right? It's I have a note up on the wall here. I have the calendar. It says unrealistic goals get better results, and so
Hmm,
so I use that as a reminder. Just to, people want to help you accomplish your goals. You just have to write them down and articulate them and share that with people. I used to write them down and not share them with anybody. I'd keep them to myself, and you have to tell people what your goals are. So
very good. So, what's one factoid that nobody knows about you that you're willing to share with us?
Uh, well, I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but in high school, I became an EMT, and so I was, probably one of the youngest EMTs in Harford County back then. I got my EMT certification with the Bloomfield Volunteer Ambulance, and then later worked on the commercial ambulance service while I uh, in high school as well as in college. It was a great job actually, during college because I could could work 40 hours in a weekend. I'd go in Fridays at 4 o'clock, work till midnight, and then work a double, 8 to midnight, or 7 to midnight, 7 to 11 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, and then I'd have the whole week off. And so, which was great most weekends, unless it was a full moon. Then it was usually a busy weekend. There is something to that, but I would say that's probably uh, something a lot of people don't realize that I'm not always I haven't always been a techie geek, if you will. I did enjoy saving lives and working on the ambulance, and that's I mentioned Lou. Lou was a paramedic, and he and I worked on the ambulance for a number of years together. So
Oh. All right, so we're in the home stretch, James, and everybody else. Uh, this is the lightning round, so it's really three quick questions. Since the pandemic started in March, really March of 2020 for all of us, that something happened to us all. What's the one thing in your life that's changed permanently because of the pandemic?
um, I guess having a good inventory of toilet paper and too many pay per view subscriptions. It seems like I don't know, 7.99, 10.99. HBO and Disney Plus and all those the streaming subscriptions seem to be a little out of control. But I think for me it's as much as we enable people to be hybrid, it's been something I've probably taken. Well, I've been home with COVID for the last 2 weeks basically, so I've been keeping my germs away from the office. But I prefer to be in the office, and so I think for me, having leveraging the remote capabilities more for me is helpful. But honestly, the subscriptions are truly out of control.
I think that's probably true for many of us. Um, so number two would be what's one piece of advice you would give uh, to a new hire Gen Z, uh, for your company? Because really, every time there's a generation change, it does change the culture somehow in the company. I know in my generation, and I'm a baby boomer, but when I was in the younger generation, we had new ideas, and millennials had new ideas, and now Gen Z is changing the game completely.
Oh
So,
yeah.
what kind of advice would you give hiring one?
It's funny. I watched I'm trying to remember the fellow's name. I can't think of it, but he was sort of an expert on the different generations and on unraveling some of the cultural differences between the different generations. And one of the things he said that was really interesting was, it didn't really occur to me uh, until he said it, which was people know the technology from the time of what they first get. So my kids have had an iPhone or an iPad since they were 5. They don't know what a rotary dial phone is, and they never will. I handed my daughter a rotary dial phone, and she's like, "Where's the on button?" And so it's uh, from the generational perspective, it's I think it's important for us as folks that are older that have had different technology and experiences, recognizing that the younger crowd is coming in only with really the technology that they were raised with, right? And so from that point forward, so most of them have only had a smartphone, uh, and so and we have plenty of younger generation folks with us, and the I think what I say to them is, be willing to learn and grow, right? And so, if you are thinking about it from being a continuous learner, part of why I like EO so much and YPO and any of these kind of things, it's there's always opportunity to learn and grow, and there's always opportunity to learn and grow within the business. And so, if you're just starting out, I think finding a mentor and finding things that you can take off somebody's plate and learn as much as you possibly can, so that you can sort of own your own experience. And I think that served me well as when I entered the career in Metro Mobile and Bell Atlantic. I sought out the people that were where I wanted to go, and asked to figure out what I need to learn. I asked them what I need to go from installing phones to how do I go and be part of the group that's building the network or building the cell towers. And so it's you got to sort of own and curate your own learning experience, I think, from that perspective.
Well, that's probably a little bit different than many people would say. So that's pretty good. And the last question of the day, and you've actually alluded to this answer a couple of times already. What's the last book you read, and how has it helped you?
Well, the Rookie CEO, of course, right? Um, I probably read one book to every three books that I listen to on Audible. So I take in a lot of content, and so literally the last book I listened, the two last books I listened to was Simple Numbers 2.0, which is a book by Greg Crabtree, and that book is really centered around um, understanding of business financials and your core capital needs. And he and the 2.0, he got into return on invested capital for business acquisitions and buying businesses or selling businesses, which was helpful from a lot. We're looking at some inorganic growth and some opportunities to acquire other businesses, and it's just good information to know. Um, the the other book was a book by the Navy SEALs, and their names escaping me. But it was um, oh boy, extreme ownership. And it's not really about ownership of the business as much as like I was saying about owning your own experience. Extreme ownership is owning. He does they do a very good job of talking through situations in Baghdad and operational stuff. But then the Navy SEALs and the folks that go out there are they're responsible for their job, and they have to own it, and they can't give up and say, oh well, it was somebody else's job to figure out which building what roof I was supposed to be on. When you got your overwatch for a platoon or something like that. And so applying that into a business environment, it's really like, are you going to throw your hands up on trying to get something done, or are you going to own it and figure it out and figure out how to get it done? Or don't wait for somebody to come and ask you about it. Go ask for help, or go figure it out and learn how to do it. So I think those two books are pretty helpful. And it also is sort of like the buck stops here. And if something fails, it's as a leader, it's my fault, right? At the end of the day, it's either I didn't properly prepare my team or those individuals to have success, or there's certainly situations that we let people go into to let them fail, because we want them to learn from failure. So that's sort of those two books were the last two ones, and I got a lot of value listening to both of them, actually.
That's fantastic. Well, James, I want to thank you for taking the time, doing all the prep with me, uh, and going through this for people. I'm sure that there's tidbits that are going to help people. Those who attended today, thank you very much. For those of you who took time out of your busy day, if you're on the replay, thank you for watching the replay. Couple of things coming up. The next CEO success story will be Robert Cummings in February the 23rd, which the emails will start going out once this one is complete. And Robert is the new CEO of Telecom Harmony, and he's a former tech. So it's always interesting to see how people make that transition. I love to do that. And for those of you who go to IT Expo, my third CEO Insights panel will be in February in Fort Lauderdale at IT Expo. And some of the guests who've been on this show have been on my panels, like Eric Canayas is one who was on the last one. But it's the question format's very similar to this, except it's live in front of a live studio audience, I should say, conference room audience of 50, 60, 70 people, and I give away signed copies of my book for the first 10 or 12 people that see me afterwards. And those are insightful, they're always fun. And so if you go there, we'll be there. Uh, I will be also writing a blog on my TMC Net CEO Insights blog, and it will describe a little bit about this session and some of the things that James has shared, and we can use that. So the replay will be live shortly after today, and there'll be a replay link that Jeff or myself will send out. And thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Bill.
All right. Take care.